As a religious institution organized by flawed human beings, the members of the Roman Catholic Church have rarely lived up to the high standards set by the omnipresent and benevolent God, whose will it claims to represent and enforce. Although each of the worst popes in history thought they were as close to divine grace as possible, they were further removed from the ethical teachings of the Bible than any other member of the institution. Like the kings and queens of medieval Europe, the clerics dissolved the separation of church and state, interfering in the temporal world and politics as they saw fit. Some popes openly had sexual relations, although they were sworn to remain celibate. Others were consumed by greed and used their influence to amass unholy amounts of wealth. Some were vengeful and literally persecuted their opponents to the grave. As a rule, the regimes of these popes were similar to those of the infamous Roman emperors Nero and Caligula. In today's video, we will talk about the worst popes in history. We start the list with Stephen VI, who ruled between 896 and 897 and subjected the Roman Catholic Church to probably the most bizarre episode in its history. After ascending to the papal throne, Stephen put his Formosus on trial for perjury, even though the latter was already dead. On Stephen's orders, Formosus's decomposed corpse was exhumed from the tomb, adorned with papal robes, and placed on the ancient throne. While Stephen read the charges of perjury, a deacon moved the corpse's skull and uttered pre-written answers in lieu of the deceased. After his remains pleaded guilty to the charges, Formosus was stripped naked and dressed in rags. 3 fingers, the ones he used to offer blessings, were cut off, while the rest of the body was thrown in the Tiber, the same place where the Romans used to throw criminals. Although the stories of the so-called cadaver synod have been told with the maddening emphasis typical of Caligula, many historians believe that there was a method at the root to Stephen's madness. The Pope had wanted to prevent Formosus from becoming a relic. Through the relics, the saints continued to be members of the community, participating in the daily life of the people who venerated them. In that sense, they were still alive. It was this ongoing presence that Stephen VI sought to deny to his predecessor. The sinful nature of the cadaver synod did not go unnoticed by those whom Stephen forced to participate. Many interrupted the earthquake that occurred during the procession as a sign of God's disapproval and an omen of Stephen's eventual downfall. John XII, one of the most depraved popes, came from a family of Machiavellian mentors. His father had already ruled Rome through puppet popes, while his grandmother married Italian conquerors to place her heirs in the Vatican. His family was known for its guile, but John XII went down in history for his sexual appetite. Unable and unwilling to honor the vows of celibacy of office, he reportedly turned the Vatican into his private brothel. Throughout his tenure as Pope, John had sexual relations with hundreds of women, including his sisters. Simon Sebag Montefiore, who devoted a chapter to John in his book, Titans of History, said that he personified the papal pornocracy of the 10th century. This is not to say that lust was the only sin of which John was guilty. According to Montefiore, the Pope was also known to employ spoil systems, offering titles and promotions to individuals who promised to help him pay off his ever-increasing gambling debts. And John made alliances with German rulers to further consolidate his rule. And he turned his back on those same leaders when they challenged his headship. Thanks to this rampant disloyalty, John was deposed several times. But, debasing himself more than any of his opponents, he always found his way back to the Vatican. His stubborn determination to remain in power led to his death while he was still in office. He died in 964 during an act of adultery. Historians still debate whether he died of a stroke or had an unfortunate encounter with an outraged husband or mistress. In life and death, John's reputation hung over the Catholic Church like a dark cloud. The Holy Emperor Otto the Great said it would take a whole day to enumerate all of John's crimes. The separation of church and state was a fundamental pillar of early modern democracies, something that many popes on this list tried to dismantle. But none meddled more in temporal matters than Boniface VIII. Over the course of his 9-year papacy, Boniface, a former student and practitioner of canon law, interfered in countless international affairs, harnessing the power of office to reverse the trend of major conflicts, such as the First War of Scottish Independence. Boniface considered himself the highest authority just below God and made enormous efforts to remain independent of European empires. In 1296, when Philip IV banned members of the clergy from serving in the government, Boniface excommunicated him from the church. Boniface's stirring mandate inspired enormous criticism. Dante Alighieri saw fit to put the Pope in hell. The crime that landed him in the 8th circle of hell was fraud, specifically simony, that is, buying and selling of ecclesiastical privileges in exchange for money or services. Boniface believed that the Holy Roman Emperor was always to answer the Pope. But Dante, whose understandings of Christianity was based on the contemplation of sins, believed that no position should prevail over another. The fact that Dante saw fit to condemn Boniface to hell when the Pope was still alive and in power shows how unpopular he was. And his special cameo in the Divine Comedy was the least of Boniface's worries. After declaring the Vatican's independence and superiority over the Holy Roman Empire, the emperor accused Boniface of simony and sodomy before sending his henchmen to seize him. When his captors demanded abdication, Boniface said that he would rather die. He was slapped by the French chancellor who was leading the troops. Next, Boniface was detained for 3 days, during which he was severely beaten and nearly executed. He was eventually released, but died from his injuries. Pope Alexander VI was a member of the Borgia family. To reach the papacy, he simply bought the title by bribing the cardinals. So far so good. Throughout his papacy, he embezzled money for the family, sold ecclesiastical positions, and had heretics killed to confiscate their property. In the folk imagination, Borgia is still today synonymous with debauchery. The most infamous legend is that he is said to have committed incest with his own daughter. But he was also a great patron of the arts and accepted into Rome, the Jews expelled from Spain in 1492. Last on this list is Giovanni de' Medici, Pope Leo X. He was pope from 1513 to 1521. A member of the powerful Medici family of Italy, Pope Leo X liked the good things in life. At the inauguration of his term, he had a child painted in gold and paraded through Rome, heralding a new golden age. The child died, but the party went on. Behold his crime, ostentation. He financed some of the most famous works of art of the Renaissance, but the large expenditures put the church's finances in dire straits. To help balance the books, he relied heavily on the sale of indulgences. In other words, offering money to the church to buy forgiveness of sins, get a dead relative out of purgatory, and even buy a plot of land in heaven. You probably remember from your history class days that this scheme of selling indulgences angered many, including Martin Luther, whose 95 Theses led to the Protestant Reformation and diminished the power of the Catholic Church.